today. We're going to do quick reflections. We're not going to do deep dive. We've all been reading hundreds of hot takes. So we're just going to do quickly on that. And then we're going to hear from our partners. We're going to do report back from California and North Carolina, some incredible partners there who won really major close elections. How do they do it and lessons learned? And then we're going to hear from Sarah about blocking Trump's agenda going forward, from Javier about building power in the states, and then we'll share some bright ideas, some early bright ideas and your thoughts. You can go to the next slide, please. And yeah, at the end, we're going to actually ask you for your thoughts as stakeholders in this. These are our speakers from today that you're going to hear from. And let's get into it. So, some quick top lines. I'm just going to do this really fast. Success story, we moved 77 million. We together, all of us together, moved 77 million, more than we ever have before, which is close to 1% of the Democratic total on our side, the amount of money moved on our side total, which is both a huge number we should be really proud of, and it's a tiny number in the scheme of things. And we moved it to over 400 local partners in 36 states. About 3/4 of that went to our top 9 presidential and Senate battleground states. And that helped our partners talk to tens of millions of voters and make voter contacts, as well as so much deeper work that we don't even have time to get into. We're getting the exact numbers. There will be reports. And at the end of the day, there was a terrible result. We lost the presidency and 3 big Senate races and other things. Devastating result. And even scarier is that we lost ground with our base, with young people, with working class voters, with voters of color, which is terrifying. And we have to do so much work to figure that out and turn that around. Some silver linings in the context of this terrible result. We did win 4 close Senate races in states where we lost the presidency. We picked up seats in the House, and we did surprisingly well down ballot given the red wave. Another silver lining in the states where we worked and where we and the Harris campaign concentrated, there was a 3.5% difference. We did 3.5 points less badly in the swing states than the non-swing states. And just to level set, the type of work that MVP funds usually adds approximately 1 to 2 points. So if it's really close, we can get it over the line. It wasn't quite close enough. So we're still here. Unlike the TV ads that people spend billions of dollars on, we're still analyzing in so many ways. The voter file data is going to come back in March. So we'll have even more precise sense, but we have a pretty broad stroke sense already. And bottom line, we worked our hearts out, but we have to challenge ourselves to do better. Our motto internally is it can't be business as usual. We have to question everything we're doing. How do we do it better? Challenge ourselves, challenge each other, challenge all of you, challenge our partners. We got to figure this out. And there's so much more we can say, but I'm just going to give some quick notes on our targeting. Basically, we targeted in the right places, but we just didn't get it over the line. Pennsylvania was our #1 state. We helped in so many ways to strengthen the ecosystem there. Long way to go, but including expanding geographically to places like Scranton and Hazleton and state colleges that didn't have organizing happening there before. Another thing I'm proud of, again, we didn't win, but early in the cycle, there was a lot of talk about abandoning the Sun Belt. The only thing that's going to save us is those 3 northern states, and we refuse to abandon the Sun Belt. We are so proud of our partners there, and this is a long-term game. We cannot make the future focused on 3 states saving us. We have to invest in voters of color in young voters, emerging voters, and even the way the census is going in 2030, we have to keep investing in the Sun Belt. And Georgia was actually almost as close as the three northern states. And if it had been invested in properly, it would have been just as close as those three northern states. Nebraska, we did a Hail Mary in Nebraska. We actually, behind the scenes, helped save the blue dot. And we made a run at that Senate race. The House, we invested in every potentially close House district and gave early support to incubating Battleground New York and also California, which you're going to hear about. Even Iowa, which was dropped off everyone else's radars until that Seltzer poll. We funded in Iowa, not enough, but we wish we'd fund a little bit more because we lost that one House race by only 799 votes, the closest race that was lost in the country. And that's, again, our targeting. We focus on everywhere we could win something. And constituencies is pretty self-explanatory, but we made bigger investments than we ever have before in youth and students, in Black communities, et cetera, all the way down to communities that are often ignored, like disabled voters. I was just on this briefing call with some incredible disabled voter organizing groups from Georgia and Michigan. And so many people are disabled and no one's talking to them. And disabled organizers are a lot of what saved the Affordable Care Act in 2017, along with all the work Sarah's going to talk about. Our strength is in our diversity of so many communities, and we are leaning into supporting all of them. And next slide, we're not even gonna linger on these slides. You're gonna get a report at the end of the year with all of the victories, but these are close races where our partners threw down hard and were a huge part of, we're either completely the margin of victory or a huge part of it. And we don't have time to even go through them all. We're analyzing, but state races, really huge things happen at the state legislative level. And shout out to our partners like States Project and Sister District and our local partners who went in there. But, you know, Wisconsin, they broke the supermajority. North Carolina, they broke the supermajority. Pennsylvania and Minnesota, they held it against a red wave. Montana, they broke the supermajority and won, picked up a ton of seats. Alaska, they actually flipped a house in our favor in a really interesting bipartisan control situation. Sorry, not Nevada. Nebraska, again, they held the supermajority against really tough odds. Anyway, so many wins down ballot. We will get you a report. Let's keep moving. Yeah, there's so many. Okay, so I want to pass it to my colleague, Sarah. And again, these are our strategies. We're going to go into, oh, sorry, we're actually not going to do Sarah first. Whoop! We're going to do a case study from my colleague, Hallie, our West Coast person, and our partner, Pablo from Communities for New California, who flipped this House race by 187 votes, and the two closest House races in the country in California. Passing it to you, Hallie. Tell us about it.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much, and great to see you all.
70% of Philadelphians are against it, so that's who we're.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. So great to see you all. So my name is Hallie Montoya Tansey. I lead our grant making in the Western US, including California, where I'm zooming in from. In 2024, I'll say actually, let's back up to 2022. In 2022, MVP's focus in California was on a constellation of competitive US House races where we were able to help our partners put together some small resources. We had some partners work on them. And at the end of the day, we didn't flip any. that realizing that, actually in a relatively bright cycle, that loss prevented us from doing what we needed to in the House, led us to invest and help to start a couple of efforts to focus more on House seats, to bring more resources, more partners to the table in a more coordinated strategy. And in California, we did that in California and in New York. In California, that took the form of Battleground California. My colleague Sarah will talk a bit about Battleground New York in a moment. But with statewide partners like the California Donor Table and California Working Families Party and others, we put together this new table, essentially, where partners who were interested in doing more on the House in a more coordinated and aligned fashion got together. We raised money under one banner and then worked on a coordinated and aligned strategy to do bigger and better programs than we'd done in 22 in these districts. And I'm so proud and happy to say this was a real bright spot in the cycle. As you can see here, we flipped 3 of the those districts that we'd failed to take in 2022, and we held on to Katie Porter's seat in quite a competitive part of Orange County after she vacated that seat to run for Senate. And we've still got a couple of targets left on there to continue going after, but we're really happy with how things went. And I'm so happy to be able to introduce you to our partner, Pablo Rodriguez at Communities for a New California, which was a major powerhouse in this coalition, doing just a huge amount of voter contact work, a huge amount of vote curing. Pablo brings a background that sort of melds together traditional community organizing and a lot of electoral sophistication, and we're so proud to support their programs. So Pablo, tell us more.
Thank you, Hallie. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody, and I'm grateful to MVP for the last couple of years of support to CNC. Again, my name is Pablo Rodriguez. I'm the founding executive director of Communities for New California. We are now 4 sister affiliated organizations. We have a C3 charity, the Education Fund, C4 social welfare organization, a state 5 to 7 PAC, and a brand spanking new Lucete Leadership Fund, which is our new super PAC. And so the work that we do at CNC is that we endeavor to interrupt the profitability of white supremacy. And the reason we frame it in that way is that the profitability of white supremacy is dictated by the theft, exclusion, and exploitation of people of the global majority, right? And so there doesn't have to be anything that's a really significant plan for people on the conservative right, extremist right side, as long as there's interests that come together, and usually that's just greed, right? And so that concentration of wealth also leads to concentration of power. And so CNC endeavors to interrupt that. For us, we center not just Latino voters, but Latina women as the ones that can interrupt that profitability and interrupt the concentration of power. So this election cycle, we worked in 4 congressional districts. Hallie noted that we worked to be able to flip congressional districts 13, and we also did work in District 27. So we were 2 of 4, right? We worked in District 22 and District 41 as well. But for 23,000 votes in those other 2 districts, we would be talking about 4 seats that we were able to flip. However, knowing that we view things a little bit differently, right? Where we feel like there's a high ceiling that it is that we have in our work. But I'm going to start by just talking about some of how it is that we were able to win Congressional District 13. Congressional District 13, if we remember 2 years ago, Adam Gray, who lost to John Duarte, which was a rematch for this year, by just 549 votes. And so then we doubled up on door-to-door canvassing to be able to have an authentic relationship with voters to turn them out to vote. I dropped in the chat 2 different things. An article about ballot curing and and a link to our research in regards to Latina women and no party preference voters. And so what's important about that is that it led us to be able to be significantly more competitive in District 13. And for me, the election actually ended last week. Congressional District 13 was the last congressional district to be called in the country. That's the second time that that's happened in my career. In 2018, we beat David Valadao, and also was the last one, the last race to be called. But what I want to highlight in the article that I dropped from the LA Times, that's behind a paywall, unfortunately, right? But I'm going to highlight here that after the election, there was nearly 5,000 ballots that were not counted by the elections office because the signature did not match. So we began a ballot curing project to be able to address those things, right? So the ballot curing is that we call or that we go door to door to a voter's home to tell them, hey, Hallie, we got the elections office would have mailed you a notice advising you that your signature did not match on your ballot. Since California is now going to 100% ballots for everybody, right? We're just following up to make sure that your ballot is counted. And so then that's essentially what was done. We were able to win that process with hundreds of volunteers. So CNC, Unite Here, Seed the Vote, Worker Power, Community Water Center, we all had volunteers phoning and going door to door. And the end result was that in the LA Times article, you can see that 1,310 Republicans cured their ballots. But on the Democratic side, 2,186 cured their ballot, meaning that that was the difference since this race was won by 187 votes. So I was going to say, I'm a professional. If anybody wanted to do any cheers or applause, I can pause. But so what I wanted to emphasize here, right? Yeah, for sure. Is that we will be prepared to defend the seat in 2 years. And given that the history is that the party in power of the White House has an uphill battle in the midterm elections, we feel confident going into being able to defend against, right? One of the examples or the thoughts that I have in regards to the extremist takeover of the federal government is people will be able to see from themselves even more than it was the last time that Trump was elected, just the damage that is being done and the lives are not getting better, right? But what I wanted to emphasize is that we are also have many learning experiences. So I wanted to highlight with the next couple of minutes that I have is that Hallie and MVP do a really good job about starting the clock now, right? Where we know that the next election season really starts in 12 months. The preparation starts today, and the election going forward will need to include ballot curing, right? And so MVP, I think, does a really good job about that as a donor circle, right? But more philanthropic foundations would benefit from learning from the process that it is that MVP does, because of the early money that we were able to receive from MVP, we were able to be in the field much sooner than we ever have been. We started our work for the general election in July in all of the 4 battleground districts. And so that made all of the difference in the end. In the link that it is that I shared, Latina women make up 1 out of every 6 registered voters in the state of California. That's 3.2 million. In the congressional battleground districts, in the South Valley or District 22, Latina women are 1 out of 3 voters. And in District 13, Latina women are 1 out of 4. That's important, as you'll see in the link that I shared about Latino sentiments. Latina women are registered to vote in higher numbers, and they turn out to vote in significantly higher numbers. It's important also when we're talking about independent voters, given the following 2 things. The majority, or let me just say in California, 30% of all registered voters are now 30% of all registered voters are independent. Of those, 30% are Latino. Of those, the majority are Latina women. Of those, 45% are 35 years of age or younger. So there's work to be done that's very serious and significant. But what's important here is that what we know is that there's lower voter turnout in California. Kamala Harris will have received likely 2 million less votes than Joe Biden did 4 years ago. And we need to ask, what is the reason for that? And the large, broad answer for that is that there's a lack of people who feel that they have a political home. But when we share the values that are shared by our organization, by MVP, and talk about what's at stake, by having an authentic relationship with voters at the doors, then that marks the difference, right? However, what we'll see and what we already know is that no party preference voters voted 10 to 15% at rates 10 to 15% lower than registered Republicans and Democrats. That's the difference. When people are asking, what is the reason that we lost some of these seats? That's the difference, and that's the reason why. But in spite of that, again, we flipped 3 congressional districts and we held the Katy Porter district. We went 4 for 6, in spite of everything being against us. So the future looks bright for us, right? Given that in 2022, what it is that I shared, and the work that we go ahead as we continue to build authentic relationships with voters for what it is that they care about, the pocketbook issues that really impact families, we feel strongly that we'll be able to build a strong campaign to be able to take back all of those seats, right? And continue forward in California as we again continue to fight against the extremists in the federal government. I think that I'm going to stop right there. I'm happy to answer any questions at the time, if we have time allotted right now. So I'll stop right there, but I'll throw it back to you, Hallie.
Thank you so much, Pablo. It's great to hear more about your amazing efforts to achieve these wins, and just appreciate so much everything that you and our other partners at Battleground California did this cycle to bring these home. I actually want to pass it now to my colleague, Sarah, to talk about some more of the work we're doing in the House. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Hi. So you heard Billy a little earlier talk about, block and build. I'm here to speak about block. So next slide, please. I know that these feel like tough times, but there is a path forward in halting the Trump agenda. During the first Trump administration, my entire job was to coordinate the grassroots efforts across the country to stop the Trump repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And I think you all remember that we were successful. There was a lot of lessons learned from that, but there's a lot of opportunity as well. So you heard my colleagues, Hallie and Pablo, speak about Battleground California. I also organize in the Northeast, and there's the Battleground New York, which is the largest field and organizing campaign in modern New York history. You'll see here that we won 5 out of 6 of the targeted House districts. And we always knew that the House would essentially run through New York, California, and a handful of other districts across the country. And while we didn't win the House, we did certainly stymie the margins. And so, we're talking about the U.S. House right now, also in large part because if there is an opportunity to block the Trump agenda legislatively, it is likely going to happen through the U.S. House. Next slide, please. So we can make an impact on the Trump legislative agenda. And next slide, please. We're focused largely on 3 major things here at MVP. We're focused on persuading Republicans in the U.S. House. We're focused on demonstrating an alternative vision of success through state policy in our progressive states. And we're focused on advancing direct action at the grassroots level. So for those of you who might be a little unfamiliar with the term direct action, it encompasses a variety of tactics, but it also includes things like sit-ins, civil disobedience, strikes and economic boycotts, and more. I'll also mention too that there is a 4th strategy that is not quite MVP's lane, but one that we're certainly supportive of in terms of stopping or halting the Trump agenda. And that's largely the legal action that we expect will be waged by Democratic governors, attorneys general, and others to halt legislation that might pass. I think I remember reading that during the first Trump administration that that California was the leader in 80% of the lawsuits against the Trump administration over their legislation and actions. But for today, and next slide, please, I'm going to focus my time with you on the legislative strategy. So right now, the U.S. House is our primary target. Although the U.S. Senate is evolving. You're going to hear me talk a lot about the U.S. House today, but please know that we're also still working on a U.S. Senate strategy, but that is, again, still evolving. But within the U.S. House, our primary targets, the Republicans hold a 220 to 215 majority. The magic number in the U.S. House is 218. We just got to find 3 votes. 3 votes. That is an awfully tight margin for Republicans. And so as we're thinking about how we're going to go into this fight, we do have some history to draw on, and you heard me just mention this briefly. The defeat of Trump's attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act during his first term, I think offers a lot of lessons and a lot of opportunities. And between 2017 and 2018, grassroots organizations across the country, and we were working with a lot of grassroots organizations, were really working in targeted House and Senate districts to stop the attempt to repeal, not just once, but it was 3 times. And I'll tell you what it took. It took laser targeting. It took a really strong power analysis that determined the pathways for persuasion for each individual congressional member. And it also took a real commitment to sticking together and not allowing the right to divide us or peel us off no matter what. So next slide, please. So as we look towards the first 100 days, while this is still evolving as well, you never entirely know what the Trump administration is going to be up to. All signs are largely looking that they're going to try to position their first fight around immigration and climate change, and then the second fight around tax cuts. And they're going to try to move this through a process called reconciliation, which is essentially just a process that limits debate and allows to bypass the filibuster in the Senate. So they just need a simple majority in the Senate. But like I said, these are some of the things that we're expecting will be the anticipated fights within the first 100 days. There may be other issues and other fights that come up as well. This is kind of the known knowns in terms of looking at the first 100 days. So next slide, please. So as we think about who are those US House members that we're going to target, we're thinking about it from a couple of different ways. So first, this is the list of congressional members who won their seat, Republican congressional members who won their seat by 3% or less. So here's kind of the starting point. Who's electorally vulnerable? And then we're going to layer on members of Congress for whom the bill at hand might have some really significant repercussions for their constituents. If I can go to the next slide on that one, please. So here's a really good example. So Trump has said that he's going to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which has initiated billions in clean energy funding and would disproportionately benefit red districts. You see some of these districts here. This is the kind of work that we will be doing with partners to determine where are the districts that are going to be disproportionately impacted by the kinds of legislation that the Trump administration is pushing forward. We did the same thing with the Affordable Care Act fight. We looked specifically at districts where repealing the Affordable Care Act would have massive impacts on rural hospitals, and then targeted those US House members who had rural hospitals within their districts and the impact on their constituents. Next slide, please. We'll also layer, oh, I'm sorry, that was my last slide. Let's just go back for 1 second. Sorry, folks. As we think about targeting for the US House as well, so we talked about who's electorally vulnerable, the impact on constituents. We'll also clearly layer in any targets for folks who have mentioned that they might be on our side on a particular issue, thinking about perhaps when abortion comes up. So this kind of layering and kind of the evolving cast of characters for whom that we will be focused on is core to our strategy to halting what we can in the Trump agenda through the legislative approach. So I'm just gonna, I'll close out here because we do get to go to the build strategy next. But blocking the Trump agenda is not going to be easy, and I'm not here to tell you it's going to be easy. The fight with the ACA was 18 months long, and I'm sure the Trump administration probably learned some lessons too from their first term as well, including the use of executive orders. But there is real opportunity here, and not only are we fighting to stop some really terrible policy, but we're also enacting an electoral lens on this. We'll be working in those deep districts in the US House and the US Senate as we get a little bit clearer on the US Senate strategy, to be working with voters, to be creating a track record in the next 2 years of the votes that their US House member or US Senate member has taken, and position ourselves well for 2026. So with that, I'm going to now pass this over to my colleague Jillian and her team and her partners in North Carolina. This closes the end of the block strategy, and we're going to move more into build.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about some of the bright spots in our recent election here in North Carolina and introduce you, if you have not already met them, to some incredible organizers here in our state who helped make this possible. So just going to do a quick overview first. Get the next slide. North Carolina defied the odds. We won a significant number of races here in our state. And over the last 8 years, we have been working hard to build and strengthen our movement ecosystem by really investing in growing the capacity of our grassroots partners. And that led to this year being able to massively expand the scale of our grassroots field operations, with groups knocking almost 5 million doors and making millions more phone calls across the state. This is 5 times the number of knocks that we did in 2020, and over 2 million of those knocks were done by groups that didn't even exist 10 years ago. Equally importantly, we are also working hard to strengthen our collaborations with all of the groups that were part of this effort, meeting regularly with each other and with our state tables to plan and strategize, and also to scale up our fundraising capacity by collaborating closely with our state donor table, other state and national funders to get this money to the field for the kind of scale that we needed to achieve. And so by massively scaling up our field operations and the fundraising needed to support it, we were able to successfully retain our governor's seat, win 3 of the top council of state races, one of which was a flip, and our state superintendent of education race, which was against an extremist Republican candidate who was at January 6th. We also broke the supermajority in the North Carolina General Assembly, with the closest race having by 1 seat, and that closest race had a margin of only 228 votes. And we retained a Democratic seat on our state Supreme Court by a margin of 734 votes. You'll hear a little bit more about this later, but the Republican candidate in that race has filed challenges to over 60,000 ballots, claiming that voters were impossibly registered in his effort to steal this election. And 2 of the folks whose votes he's challenged are the Democratic candidate's parents. It's a big fight that we're dealing with right now. But one of the groups that was critical to all of these electoral successes was Down Home North Carolina, and we are thrilled to have the co-EDs of Down Home, Todd and Dreama, here with us today. They'll tell you about their work and about that next big fight. But one thing that I wanted to highlight before they speak is here on the screen right now, that in this election, where 90% of counties across the country moved to the right, 6 of Down Home's rural North Carolina counties move to the left. And you can see in this map from the New York Times, these little blue dots, little blue arrows going to the left, and the ones that are circled are the work where Down Home was really digging in deep, knocking doors and doing field work. And so this just shows that their model is exactly the kind of work that we need to be doing to win and keep winning in battleground states like North Carolina. And I'm going to pass the mic to Todd and Dreama to share a little bit more. Thanks so much for being here, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jillian. Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Dreama. I'm executive co-director of Down Home. I co-direct here with Todd. And I just want to start with a big thank you to the MVP community. We were able to run the largest field program we've ever ran, largest in the history of our organization. And we were able to start early, which meant that we were able to hire people and truly invest in the training of our canvassers and members that were out talking to people. And so just want to start off with that immense gratitude for that. Down Home, we do build power with the multiracial working class here in North Carolina, in rural areas of North Carolina. And we started our cycle out in a persuasion, deep canvas, talking about abortion, very personal stories of abortion, sharing conversations on front doorsteps with people where literally we were changing people's minds and hearts, one conversation at a time. And that happened across our state, where we saw movement in people in where they felt they thought they wanted to, where they felt they fell on the issue of abortion, and ended up voting for our candidates who were for reproductive freedoms for people here in North Carolina. We did our work across 22 counties here, and I just want to highlight one particular program, which is our Public School Strong program. It is a distributed model program where parents, teachers, guardians were working to push back against the right-wing attacks on school boards that involve things like book banning, and just gave people an opportunity to push back. We were able to train over 700 volunteers in over 70 counties here in our state, and they went on to endorse over 80 candidates for school board, and over 40 of those candidates won. So we are very excited about the work of that particular program, and Todd's going to tell you a little bit more about what we've done.
Yeah, y'all, I just want to echo Dreama's gratitude. MVP, y'all are the truth. Like, y'all have been at our backs since we were founded in 2017. This was really a year where we set out to do some things we weren't sure we could pull off in typical Downham fashion. We were ultimately able to break the Republican supermajority here by a single seat, by, as Jillian said, just 200 some votes. And without your support and belief in the year-round organizing that Downham does, I don't think it would have been possible. I mean, we're heartbroken by the national electoral outcome, but we had a call with our members right after the election to make some meaning of the moment. And a lot of us on staff were feeling pretty rough about what happened at the presidential level. And our members were basically like, y'all, we did everything we came to do. We're fired up. Like, we're not going to take one step back. Like, we're going to keep building our power. We're going to get to governing power in North Carolina, and we're going to defend our communities against the MAGA agenda. So we're actually calling you from a leadership meeting here where we've been going over our own block and build strategy for next year in North Carolina. We may want to add some of our congressional delegation to your power map because we're ready to dig in and defend. But yeah, y'all, just trying to look back at the year, a couple quick stories. One, I just want to give gratitude also to our working class rural members who seriously left it all on the field. Many of them chose to run for office for the first time. Many of them won office. Those persuasion conversations that Dreama talked about, that was in the heat of the summer through the assassination attempt. They were out on doors that were right of center. A lot of canvassers of color in rural areas talking to white people about abortion, like things that are really not imaginable, that gave us these really, really close margins. And our members, seriously, they fought with every single thing that they had, and they were able to do that because y'all were at their back. And then I really also just want to appreciate MVP for understanding the power of year-round organizing work and infrastructure building. We're fighting against really intense gerrymanders here in North Carolina. This was the first year with a voter ID law, and we weren't sure we could break the supermajority. That one district that we won to protect the reproductive freedoms of millions of people in our state, among other things, that candidacy actually was won through a local organizing fight over a small park in a Black neighborhood, where our members dug in to revitalize their park. Through that fight, they recruited a candidate to become the first Black mayor in the small town of Oxford. And one of our closest champions sat on the city council and voted for our park. He went on to run for this district, and that is who we elected by 200 some votes. So when we organize year round and we organize with our people on the issues that they care about, we can do really big things. And we were really proud to be able to buck the trend here in North Carolina this year. So again, just tons of gratitude for y'all. Please keep doing what you're doing and supporting year-round organizing work, because we know it works and it's the best way for us to get power. And we're on our way. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Hey,
much,
don't go
y'all.
away, don't go away.
Oh, we'll
We
say.
gotta talk about the override fight.
Oh, you're right.
What
Well,
y'all
yeah.
are doing is amazing with that. Amazing.
Yeah, y'all. So keep us in your mind. Obviously, our state was horribly impacted by Hurricane Helene, and the Republican leaders in our House and Senate have seen fit to write a power grab bill that would be a Republican takeover our state board of elections and shrink the ballot cure window, because we successfully cured ballots across the state to elect Allison Riggs to the Supreme Court. This is a power play, anti-election, anti-voter, basically retaliation against voters bill that's dressed up like hurricane relief. And they are using their last gasp of a veto-proof majority to try to ram this through. The Republican leadership did not consult their delegates from Western North Carolina. And those delegates are unhappy with this. So we've been meeting with Republican Western North Carolina delegates, telling them to stand strong, not to get bought out cheap for a Raleigh political agenda, but to vote against this fraudulent bill. The vote is tomorrow. We've collected and delivered hundreds of handwritten letters to these representatives. We've met with them, and we have reason to be hopeful. We will know around this time tomorrow whether or not they have succeeded with their veto override attempt, but we're feeling optimistic and nervous. Thank you, MVP, for showing up to support us with this fight. They just won't give us a break here. But we're going to fight through the bell, and hopefully we'll win tomorrow.
Thanks so much, y'all. I am going to pass the mic over to my colleague Javier, who's going to tell us about some exciting work in the Midwest. And yeah, we'll be waiting to see what happens in North Carolina tomorrow. Cross your fingers for us.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you all for being on today. I love this community because you all make the work that you just heard about possible. So I want to talk, and I'm so happy to have gone right after North Carolina, because I want to talk about another state where we have some outliers. So North Carolina was an outlier. Minnesota was an outlier. So I come from movement work in Minnesota. I was the president of a local of SEIU for 14 years. And I come out of the organizing ecosystem and helped build it. And that is responsible for a lot of the progressive policy victories that we've heard about in the last couple of years coming out of Minnesota. So one of the things that North Carolina has in common with us is that we had these close races where organizing made the key difference. So we're going to just share with you all a little bit from an email that a state representative who won his re-election just right after the election sent to our largest partner, our largest grantee in Minnesota, Faith in Minnesota. After the election, he wrote them a very detailed email. There's some of it there on your screen. I want to share another part of it. He's talking about, he's addressing those very specific ways in which they helped him win his race, a very tight race. So he says, similar, when you look at precincts where I outperform Harris by the most, we see the impact of your work. Ward 2, Precinct 3, probably our largest concentration of Muslim voters. They have a very large Muslim organizing coalition as part of Faith in Minnesota. Ward 1, manufactured home parks, and and another ward also manufactured home parks. They had a specific program targeting. And then Ward 1, Precinct 3 was our second largest concentration of Muslim voters. So, like, the fact that this state representative was this aware of the work that they did was not coincidental. 2 years ago, Faith in Minnesota innovated in a way that we are looking to blow up and have that do the same thing across the country where legally possible. They innovated by creating a coordinated PAC, so a PAC that can legally coordinate with a party. And although most organizations, what they do with their PACs is to use it to give donations to politicians and that way sort of establish relationships with those who win. Faith in Minnesota did something different. What they did was, with the coordinated PAC, they surrounded campaigns, legislative campaigns, with their leaders, their members and staff, who provided very high-level campaign support. So when Representative Norris sent this email, he sent it to a long list of people some of whom I know personally, some I don't, but who are literally just leaders of the organization. He knew all of their names and knew who to send this to. That was the secret sauce to why we won, how we won all of the big policy victories that we won with a 1-vote majority in the Senate and a 4-vote majority in the House in this last legislative session. And it was by winning races like this one that that in Minnesota, in a year of a red wave, we did not lose the House. We had a special the Senate was not up for election, but there was one seat up at a special, and so we kept our majority in the Senate. And in the House, it's now a 50-50 split. It's like only happened one other time in Minnesota history. So we'd rather have kept the majority, but 50-50 split means that Republicans will not be able to do any of the good things that were done. Another of our partners, probably our second largest grantee in Minnesota, is Unidos Minnesota and the 100% campaign. They decided this year to also create a coordinated PAC. They joined forces to do that. So this was an organization that's dedicated to organizing in the Latino communities, and one focused on climate change. They put together a PAC called the Future Fund that similarly worked in districts like this across the state. And this is the story behind how we kept those. We had these outlier outcomes in Minnesota, but there's another very important way in which Minnesota and the important thing that Minnesota and North Carolina have in common, and that is that for years in both states we have been investing in not just strong organizations but a strong ecosystem. In Minnesota, this is the work there has been a 10-year investment in organizing. First with a large campaign for SEIU when I was president of the local there, and then as SEIU resources dwindled, that was exactly when MVP was founded, and MVP picked up that slack. And when I say investments in ecosystems, what I mean by that is investments that address and that build capacity around across multiple organizations at once. The reason I am so focused on state ecosystems, and when we talk about the build agenda that we have coming to that we are working on right now, is because I've seen how a strong, healthy ecosystem is one where groups are working in aligned fashion, working with each other in a way that allows them to think bigger, make bigger asks, and have bigger wins, learn from each other, learn innovations. So one group creates a coordinated PAC, another does it in the next cycle, to learn from each other. North Carolina, Jillian has done fantastic work over the years to resource leadership cohorts and organizing cohorts across different organizations so that people can do things like what they did in this last cycle, which was to collectively decide that they were going to knock on 4 million doors, more than they'd ever done before. And they actually they surpassed that goal by I think 400,000 votes. That kind of collective decision making, a collective acting, is to me encapsulated in the words of a Minnesota leader, a dear friend of mine named Veronica Mendez, who, when talking about the importance of having a healthy ecosystem to the work of her organization, she said, can you move to the next slide? She said, we understand we no longer pick fights that we can win alone. We don't pick fights that because by definition they are too small. Can I get the next slide, Julie? Sorry, thanks. Because they are by definition too small. That is the vision that I have, that we have at MVP, for how to export this model that has worked, that we are seeing work in North Carolina, so that Minnesota and North Carolina are not outliers anymore. So let me go a tiny bit deeper in what we mean by an ecosystem, because it's a bit of a buzzword, and I always find it helpful to go to the metaphor, the original metaphor in nature. You might remember an image like the one on the right there from your science classes in elementary and middle and high school. But a healthy ecosystem is one where symbiosis is happening, where different parts of the ecosystem are working together, sometimes in ways they might not even understand. So a healthy ecosystem is dynamic and adaptive and can be damaged and then recover. It doesn't mean we don't have losses. We don't have we had a tough year in Minnesota. North Carolina had a tough year, and they have a tough fight happening literally tomorrow. Doesn't mean that bad things don't happen or that challenges don't happen. It means that we can recover from them and can be resilient. A healthy ecosystem is made out of mutually beneficial relationships, so that people are, like I said, learning from each other, and building on that knowledge. And that critical parts of it are invisible to the eye, but that they create a power that together collectively we can see that's its impact. And in a healthy ecosystem, when something dies, it becomes fertilizer, and that is really, we have a culture and movement work of burnout. And it's very important that when executive directors leave an organization, that organization not crumble, because that can have an impact on an entire ecosystem. And so when I look at when I think to myself, how would we like to at MVP and in the movement more generally create the kind of successes that we've seen, and it is by building infrastructure. And so so if you can go to the next slide. So this is work that I've worked on for a long time, and thinking about state ecosystems and looking at how do we assess. We actually I have a retreat with my team this week where we are doing a deep dive into analyzing your state ecosystem so that we can ask the big questions. How do we move our state from point A to point B? And so if you'll know the concept of targeted universalism, where we're aiming high for everyone, but also understanding that people have different starting points. So there are nascent ecosystems where there is collaborative state work is in its infancy, but that there might be early signs of promise. A building ecosystem where people have really started to work to have a shared analysis, and to be doing like resourcing and sharing resources and budgeting and planning together. And a healthy ecosystem is one where you're at that point first where people have that understanding of what we saw Veronica Mendez's words say, that have an understanding that our collective work together depends on each other. So we are really focused on what kind of investments have that impact of not just building individual organizations, but building the ecosystem as a whole. And could talk about that for hours, but won't. But just know that we are deeply committed to learning not just from the mistakes, why we lost, but also learn from the outliers, learn where we had successes, so that we can replicate those, so that Minnesota and North Carolina are no longer outliers, but really just the norm of the progressive country that we seek to build together. And with that, I will pass it over back to Billy.
Thank you, Javier. And I'm going to go really fast because we actually want to ask your question. We want to ask you questions. So I'm going to go right to bright ideas because we promised those. And if people can stay on a few more minutes, want to ask you questions. So state level gatherings, we want to support that. And we're going to support those. People need to get together, strategize, figure out what to do, be in community. The nonprofit killer bill, the HR 9495, we have to get information around that. That's the first fight we get information around, and then everything else that comes down the pike will be information already. Battleground America, you already heard about. Take the New York and California models to places like Iowa and all those other House districts. I'm just going to skip through Wisconsin, Virginia. Wisconsin, huge state support Supreme Court race, April 1st. We have to get information around that. Virginia, others coming soon. These are opportunities to do experiments. And then over on the right-hand side are like bigger buckets of experimentation that we're going to work on with lots of allies. And so let's go to the polls. Basically, we want to ask you guys questions. You are our partners, you're our stakeholders. We're going to have to do this together. The conventional wisdom is the money's all going to go away next year. Some of there's a crazy thing out there that's like field doesn't work. you know, because Trump won anyway, which is wrong, but it's complicated. Anyway, we want to ask your thoughts. And this is a poll. There's 4 questions. First question is, how satisfied are you with as an MVP donor with MVP? Are you thrilled? Are you not satisfied? Some of you need more information. So that's the first question we want to get a gauge on. The second question is, what would you be most excited for MVP to fund? And this is a little bit impressionistic, but there's direct grants to organizations, and then there's adjacent strategies like meta organizing with organizations and helping organizations with their digital strategies, and working with people doing digital first strategies and trying to connect them. We don't have to all do this all ourselves. Shout out to our partner Way to Win, which is doing all this incredible digital strategy work. So that's the second question. We're just trying to get a sense of how much you guys are like, stay the course, focus on funding local groups, and how much are you like, we need to experiment with other stuff. We're obviously going to mostly continue funding local groups because it works. But just want to gauge where y'all are at. Question number 3, how likely are you to donate to MVP and our local partners in 2025? Our local partners are scared. They're coming to us like, how's funding looking in 2025? So getting a sense as early as possible of what that's going to be looking like is critical. And then we're so grateful that you're donors. Any of you who want to volunteer, part of how we are going to transform this country, I'm going to be honest, I think to do what we need to do, we're going to need to raise 2 to 3 times as much money. And I'll say more about that. I know we're at time, and I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes talking about the landscape with that, and then we'll go into Q&A. So, well, first of all, there are 5 levels to this. One is we need to help groups sustain themselves, not have to do layoffs that cut into the bone in off years. That is a constant problem. We need to interrupt that, which is, part of why, like, our organizing needs to be better. We don't just need to do field, we need to do field better. And that means starting earlier, keeping leaders, from leaving the organizations and not having to constantly retrain new leadership. So the first thing is we have to just sustain organizations to do their work in the odd numbered years. 2, they're going to be facing unprecedented attacks, which means they're also going to need additional support for security, digital security, legal attacks, a whole range of things. And some communities we know are going to be, even more under attack, immigrant communities, LGBTQ communities, etc. 3, they need to innovate. They need resources to upgrade their work and take it to the next level. 4, we're facing, Elon Musk and the right-wing billionaires. So even to stay at parity with everything they're doing. And 5, we have to figure out this media landscape thing. And not all that has to go through MVP, but we are going to have to organize more money to do a lot of experimentation in addition to the core work. So I think it's, this next cycle, we need to be raising or moving 2 to 3 times as much money to this work. Ideally more, but I think that's a baseline. And that sounds daunting. I know, we all extended ourselves as much as we could this year. And this is not like you need to give more money as an individual. you did great, right? People on this call, are people who like threw down. You're incredible. We need to get more people. There's so much money. There's $500 billion a year. $500 billion a year that people give away to charity. Less than 1% of that goes to anything like the kinds of things that MVP funds. Less than 1%. And half that money is given from Democrats. So $250 million a year, approximately, Democrats give away to things that are not as effective. Are you following me? In meeting our goals as the work that the group's MVP funds are doing. So, sorry, I have to get this quiz out of my face. So the money is there. We just need to let more people know that these models exist. When people know they exist, they get inspired. All of you who've organized house parties, who've invited your friends, the number one thing we hear is people are like, this gives me hope. It's not just, oh, more candidates who are emailing, texting me. And it's not just, I'm giving to charity and there's no way that I can keep up with the scale of needs. These are structural interventions that are charity and politics and education and transforming society at the same time. It's the best thing that any of us could possibly hope to fund. And we are aggregating these groups and strategies and making it easy. So we can do this. We can raise 2 or 3 times as much money, and we're going to need to do it by more people becoming ambassadors, becoming organizers, sharing the work with other people. We've had such a good, I mean, our volunteers are incredible, basically, and they're almost like a second staff, and they are building volunteer hubs. You can be an all-in volunteer. You can be someone who organizes a house party once a year and invites people to just learn about this model. So we're here to recruit you. And this is not like a give now kind of ask, but it's a think big over the holidays about your legacy, about the world you want to see, about the strategies. Don't give up hope. We are here. We are all here. We're going to do this together. We're going to hold each other. You know, Trump's going to make a lot of mistakes, and we're going to be right there holding people accountable and doing the really hard transformational work that you heard about on this call to change hearts and minds. If we could scale the things you heard today on this call, we can transform this country. We just need to scale the things that are working. We can transform this country. So thank you all. I'm gonna stop there and transition to Q&A. So let's do some Q&A and let's see. I see some questions in the chat. I'm just looking at the first one. Is 501c3 money really useful to you? So this is a partisan call. We can't talk about 501c3 on this call, but I can just say generically that many of the organizations that we have funded, they are tandem organizations. They have 501c3s and they have 501c4s. And in terms of organizational health, their 501c3s do all kinds of important work, from issue organizing, educational work, charitable work that also needs money. That has nothing to do with the partisan goals, but that are important for their organizing their community. And yes, it's time to do year-end charitable giving, and that is encouraged as well. But that is separate from what we're talking about in this call. That I'm sharing that as a clarification. So, what other questions? If there are MVP folks in or near the Austin, Texas area, can someone connect them with me? This is my favorite kind of question. I have a friend who'd like to get involved where she lives. Okay, we all have a friend in Austin or somewhere who would like to get involved. People want community, and the magical thing about these local MVP teams is they build community. And want to invite Regina from our donor organizing team to say more about that. If you'd like to, I'm sure I missed most of these questions. And want to just call in anyone on the MVP team who sees questions in the chat who you want to answer to just jump on in and answer them.
Sure. Thanks, Billy. You know, one of the questions we're understandably being asked is, are we going to keep investing in grassroots organizing when we've been so badly beaten? Totally understandable. And here's the thing. For those of us truly for the people, for justice, willing to fight centuries of structural capitalism and patriarchy and colonialism and racism and heteronormativity, we're always the underdog. So to me, the real question is, why the hell do we keep doing this? Why do we keep organizing? Why do we keep funding organizing? Are we insane? The answer is yes, we are a little bit insane. We are insanely optimistic that this world can be better, but we also are insane in the best possible ways because we know how much worse things will be if we stopped organizing. Are there ways the organizing that MVP funds can improve? Always, with all forms of organizing. And we must be and will be vigilant and honest about figuring out what's working and what's not working. But at the same time, we cannot keep asking organizing and organizers to save us in congressional and presidential elections without funding it in the in-between years. And then blaming organizing and organizers for not doing enough. All organizers, we all know we're not doing enough. I've been an organizer since I was 15 years old when someone got shot at my high school and I decided to take action around gun safety. And we're always starting with too little too late. That's why Billy founded MVP and why so many of us has worked here for years, because we know we can't ask power building organizing to save us if we don't fund the power building parts of it. We can't ask organizing to save us until we really truly start moving groups what they need and what other people call off years, we call building years. The reality for MVP in our groups is we were only able to move about 20% of our total raise over the last 4 years. So from 2021 to 2024, only 20% went to 2021 and 2023. That means that no groups got 100% of the support they needed in those 2 years. People love to hear about deep canvassing. I personally adore it. I spent years of my life developing a deep canvassing model around marriage equality. But deep canvassing isn't a one-off conversation. It's months and sometimes multiple years of talking to the same folks and getting them to trust you and be so moved that they change their actions. That's a big ask for humans. And so for deep canvassing to work at the scale needed for elections, groups absolutely need more than 20% of their election year funding to keep running those programs. They need to not have to get rid of 80% of their organizing staff in years like 21, 23, and upcoming 2025. So my lifeline organizer plea is one, a thank you for being part of this with us up until this point, and an ask for you to be part of us for the first time ever to really fund organizing at least closer to 50% at what it needs in 2025. It's how our model works. The part that's currently broken is we aren't able to support groups in the off years in the way we need to be able to. And I know that here at MVP, which is founded and built and run still by organizers, we're committed to making the changes we know we have to, deepening organizing, experimenting with new forms of organizing, figuring out how we can be in the most strategically targeted places possible each cycle. But we can't do the old or the new work well without fundraising the in-between years. And that's why we're so committed to our donor organizing work, because expanding and finding new and better ways for donors to help bring folks into our full theory of change is what it's going to take. So I just say, don't count organizing out as the path to change we need until we've given it its fair shot. And I'm hoping we can do the best job we've ever done of that in 2025.